I think we can start, right? Good afternoon, everybody. I am Shiva Vasudevan, President of Site Hamilton Session. Thank you for being with us today and welcome to the first virtual speaker event of this year. Today's speaker event will be divided into two parts. The first part will include two student presentations by Mohawk College students on the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions on the traffic volumes in the town of Milton. After both the student presentations are over, we will open the floor to questions. And in the second part of the event, there will be an interactive discussion on where active transportation work stands in the province of Ontario. And this discussion will be led by Kate Whitfield of Alta Planning and Design. So let's start the first student presentation, which will present findings from the MyoVision data on the impacts of COVID-19 on the bicycle traffic trends in the town of Milton. This presentation will be made by Anna Devi and Huzifa Ansari. With that, I will turn the floor over to Anna and Huzifa. Please share your presentations.
Sorry, Shiva. I think we're going to start with Megan and Lily, actually.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. So in the second presentation, the findings from the same MyoVision data will be used for presenting the daily and monthly variations of traffic data during the various stages of the pandemic. And with that, Megan and Lee, please take over and please share your screen.
Thank you. Please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, looks great.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. My name is Megan and my partner here, Lee. So when it comes to traffic, there's always a degree of variability. No two roads are ever the same. And understanding the volume of a road is one of the first steps to defining the impacts of that variability and establishing an idea of what typical traffic patterns are like. The best way to do so is to look at the data. And courtesy of the town of Milton, in MyoVision, we were able to analyze a full year's worth of 24-hour data for intersections within Milton, Ontario. For those who aren't aware, Milton is a fast-growing commuter town located in the Halton region. Our study analyzed traffic patterns along Ontario Street using data from the major intersections as a base. Our analysis proved that the studied intersections experienced similar volume trends, so therefore we'll only show our findings for one of them, being Ontario Street at Laurier Avenue, as circled here. So in this aerial photo of our intersection, you can see our major road Ontario Street runs on a north-south alignment, while Laurier Avenue runs east-west. Ontario Street has 2 through lanes, while Laurier only has 1 through lane, and there are left turn lanes in each direction. Now that we know what our intersection looks like, you may wonder what types of vehicles were present during the time of data collection. And this chart clearly shows that 95% of the vehicles were light vehicles. Light is defined as either a motorbike, a car, or a light goods vehicle, as in a pickup, a van, or a tow truck.
Are you on?
Although bicycles are at a seemingly 0%, the volumes of bicycles were actually, it was actually rounded down because the bicycle volumes were so low compared to the other modes of transportation. Now, how does this volume actually translate throughout the week? Well, to look at that, we estimated daily variation factors. And here are the results. Before we get into the numbers that you see on the screen, it's important to note that factors greater than 1.0 signify a lower than average daily volume, whereas factors below 1.0 signify a greater than average daily volume. And with that in mind, Friday's daily factor of 0.89 means that Friday was the peak day of the week in terms of traffic volume. In comparison, Sunday, Monday, and Saturday have factors above 1.0, therefore they were lower than average traffic volumes on those days. To gain a better understanding of the week, we calculated an average factor of 1.02 for all 7 days. But if we did exclude the low volumes of Sunday and Saturday, and we calculated an average factor of 0.95 just for the weekdays. So this shows that the low weekend volumes do actually skew the factors. And if road operation was designed based on such low volumes, it would actually underestimate the peak traffic of this road. So I'll turn it over to Lily to talk about the monthly trends.
Thank you, Megan. To analyze how traffic changes throughout the year, monthly variation factors were also calculated. Similar to what Megan stated earlier in regards to daily variation factor, monthly variation factor also follows the same rule, that if the factor is below 1, it actually signifies volume above the average. And if we look at the graph, we can see from August 2019 to March 2020, traffic trend was relatively stable. And from March to July 2020, traffic fluctuated significantly. Two trends was separated by March, which was when Ontario announced the state of emergency. We list the 3 months on the side so you can compare the difference. From the previous graph, we identified that there were 2 separate trends throughout the year. So we did calculate monthly variation factors based on the separate trends. The ones highlighted in blue were calculated based on pre-pandemic's AADT, and the ones highlighted in yellow were calculated based on AADT during the pandemic. And with those separate trends, we can see that there is less variation in monthly variation factor, and that the yearly monthly variation factor was skewed by the lower volume. We just saw how traffic changes with monthly variation factor. Now let's look at how the actual volume was impacted. We picked 3 months, October, April, and June, to show you the difference. And if we were to assume October with 100% of the traffic, April goes down to 46%, and June had only 74% of October's volume. And we can clearly see here, June's volume had not restored to October's volume. However, the peak hour was relatively stable throughout the year. Friday's peak hour volume from October, April, and June were modeled on Visceral to see how intersection was impacted. And we can see here from April and June, there was less delay and less volume to capacity ratio. And the intersection was under capacity and was running at a slightly better level of service B.
So in conclusion, when we considered what types of information we gained from the data, we discovered that Friday was the peak day of traffic. Volume trends prior to the pandemic were relatively stable with very little differences in the variation factors. However, once the pandemic had started, the factors showed that the volumes were much lower than typical volumes, especially in April when we had the greatest reduction in traffic volume. And of course, with less traffic, the intersection performed at a better level of service, LOSB, meaning that there was almost no congestion or delay. So with that, we really saw the value of having such extensive data, and the factors that were obtained can be very useful for future planning. As much as they provide insight into the current demand, they also allow for a projection of future demand. So it is encouraged that Milton continues to monitor these trends to determine whether or not they are stable. A huge thank you goes out to the town of Milton and Myovision for supplying us with this data and giving us this opportunity. And a special thank you to the Hamilton ITE section for giving us this fantastic moment to share our presentation with the audience. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan and Lee. And now we will move on to the second presentation that will be by Anna, Devi, and Huzifa Ansari. They'll be presenting the findings from the main same Myovision data on the impacts of COVID-19 on the bicycle traffic trends in the town of Milton. So please go ahead, Anna and Huzifa.
Hi, thank you. Just give me a moment to get my screen share up. Please let me know if you're having any trouble seeing the presentation.
We can see it.
Okay, fantastic. So do you remember last spring when you couldn't buy a bike because they were all sold out everywhere? We certainly remember that. And we're going to investigate some data in the town of Milton to see what was going on during that period. So we are Josefa Ansari and Anna Davey. We are 5th semester students at Mohawk College in the Civil Engineering Technology Transportation program, and we are here to present COVID-19 impacts on bicycle traffic in the town of Milton.
So I'm Josefa Ansari. Before entering a civil engineering technology program at Mohawk College, I worked in a healthcare. I did my 2 co-ops at Halton region. I enjoy video games, hiking, and traveling, and I love airplanes.
And I am Anna Davey. I spent 15 years working in the communication field before entering my program. I actually do get really excited about active transportation infrastructure. I also wake up early to watch pro cycling, which isn't as related to the previous fact as it sounds. And I am forever promising that I will teach myself R one day.
So the data was collected using my Vision Scout cameras for 1 year between August 2019 and July 2020. The data was, we'd like to thank Town of Milton for giving us access to their data to complete our technical analysis for the project. So these are the intersections we analyzed through a Town of Milton, where we had access to data for an entire year.
Yeah, these are the intersections where we were provided 24/7 data, and we did choose those 12 intersections, and we're going to lead off with a quick comparison of bicycle AADT, or average annual daily traffic, and MADT, or monthly annual daily traffic analysis. So here we've just got a bit of an aggregate chart of what we're seeing at those 12 intersections. We've got a calculated AADT of 574.9. December had the lowest MADT at 65.1, whereas June had the highest MADT at 1,758.4. Now, these AADT values are almost certainly inflated from the values that the town of Milton is currently using, as they do include the period from March 2020 to July 2020, where there was a significant increase in cycling activity. You can see the intersection AADTs broken down at the right. And I did think it was sort of a fun exercise here. I've highlighted all of the months where there was twice the volume or twice the MADT of the AADT, even with those inflated numbers. So you're seeing June, July, May, there's a big increase in terms of cycling activity at those intersections, again, even using sort of that inflated AADT value. And now we're going to discuss cycling facility selection on Thompson Road, which was one of the corridors that we analyzed. We did sort of have a bit of an anomaly when we were trying to analyze our vehicular AADT for this nomograph selection. So we did select 10,000 vehicular AADT as a very conservative estimate. It is a heavy vehicular arterial road. It seems very likely that the AADT is actually well in excess of that. And we also selected an 85th percentile speed of 70 kilometers an hour. The posted speed is 10 kilometers an hour, and we don't actually know what the 85th percentile speed is. So that seemed like a reasonable assumption to make. So as you can see, that puts us firmly into that red zone where we're looking at some sort of separated facility, a grade separated bike path, or a shared multi-use path, something like that.
So for this one, as you can see, with the when we convert 60% into miles per hour, it's about 37. So we encourage Town of Milton with the 10,000 vehicles per day with the speed of 37.3 miles per hour. We encourage Town of Milton to use a separate bike, as we saw on the nomograph in the previous slide. And again, this is the graph from the NACTO all ages and abilities, as it suggests the same thing as we saw on two previous graphs, that there should be a protected bike lane and or reduce the speed on the road in order to provide safety to a cyclist on the road. So this is the current condition on Thompson Road right now, with four-lane road with a little bit space on the side, which if town decides to put the cycling facility in place, they'll have ample amount of space to put the facility in place.
Now, when it comes to facility selection, obviously there are lots of factors to consider. Some of the major ones in this particular corridor is that there's a lot of heavy residential development along the entire corridor that we analyzed. So you're going to expect to see young children, young families in that area on their bikes. It's also a major route to the Milton GO station, so it would be pretty reasonable to assume also we're going to see some commuter cycling behavior there as well. And as Josefa mentioned on the previous slide, there is ample boulevard space between the edge of pavement and the sidewalk. So in keeping with, those various guidelines, OTM, FWHA, NACTO, we do recommend some sort of separated cycling facility, ideally a shared use path, and then that would encourage everybody, including young children, hesitant commuters, to have a safe and comfortable cycling experience in that corridor. We're also just going to quickly do a deeper dive into some of the data at one of our intersections, Thompson and Childs. So here we can see sort of a heat map of our day of the week volumes. We can see that overall weekdays are much more popular for cycling than weekends. Weekends were really only more popular in April and May, in that sort of post-pandemic period. And here as well, when we look at our total volumes, we see that there's that big increase in volume after the lockdown was announced in March of 2020. And at this point, when we were analyzing our data, we were still sort of expecting to see that most of that increase would come on weekends, as families would have more leisure time, fewer people commuting, things like that. But what we actually saw was that weekday total traffic increased 173% July 2020 over August 2019, whereas weekend total traffic only increased 162% over the same period. And if we look at sort of our percentage of weekday to weekend split, we see that you do have that increase in the cold weather months where you expect to really only see your very dedicated cyclists on the road. And then there's a big decrease in weekday activity until May, when we get sort of back to our baseline values, 78% weekday travel versus 77% in August of 2019. And of course, in May, what happened is people started going back to work. So returning to behavior that they would have used prior to the pandemic. So for our conclusions, there was that dramatic increase in the cycling activity after the pandemic. However, once the province started to reopen, we sort of saw a return to our baseline in terms of how people choose to travel, what days, although at a much higher volume. It would be interesting to investigate public ridership trends during that same period. I do expect that we're sort of seeing a mode split or a mode shift from transit to bike trips, but without access to that data, that is a supposition. Should these trends persist, the town of Milton would be recommended to install a separated cycling facility on the Thompson Road corridor. And as a final thought, bike traffic was up 289% July 2020 over August 2019. And with that, I will open the floor to questions. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our data. Thank you to the town of Milton and to Maya Vision for providing us with the data. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Dania, Hazifa, Megan, and Lee for a wonderful presentation. Now we will open the floor to questions to any of the student presenters. To ask your questions, either raise your hand using the hand icon or please enter your questions in the chat box. We have one question in the chat box. This was related to Megan and Lee's presentation. And the question is from Jamal, related to how much budget did you budget for this work?
I'm sorry, but I was wondering if Jamal, please, you could unmute and clarify your question.
Yes, thank you for sharing this presentation with us. Like MyoVision, did you say MyoVision provided the data to you, or you had to hire MyoVision to do the counts for you?
They provided the data to us.
At no cost?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of this presentation.
Yes, well, it was our entire class. We were all provided a set of data from certain intersections within Milton.
Okay, are you actually students also at Mohawk College, or you work with the town of Milton?
I am a student, both
Okay.
Lee and I. Yes.
I see, I understand now. Okay, thank you. Yes, thanks.
No problem.
Sorry, this is Sajjad for MyoVision. Just to clarify that a bit. Yeah, exactly. So the data is not ours. The data is the town of Milton, right? So they own the data, and kindly Heidi provided the students at Mohawk College to be able to access their data. We're just the people who sort of just provide that access, pretty much. But we don't own the data or in any way provide any access to anyone without the agency's permission or the city's permission. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thanks, Sajjad.
Yeah, no problem.
So I actually see a question regarding the cyclist data. If it was an increase between all age groups or if it was mostly adults. Unfortunately, we don't have any idea about the age breakdown. These were just trips that were recorded by MyoVision's scout cameras. So just identifying vehicle classes as they go past. So all of our cyclist data was simply one group of bicycle data. We don't actually know what the age breakdown of those cyclists was, although I would absolutely love to find out. So thank you so much for that question.
I will give it a minute for any more questions, and then we will move on to the next part of the presentation. There is another question from Sajid. Is there an unexpected impact on the vehicular traffic if bike lanes were to be installed along the corridor identified? This would be for
Yes, I think we can probably both answer that from our different perspectives. I would expect that there would be some kind of impact, as there often is when we install cycling facilities. If the town of Milton were to take my personal recommendation of using boulevard space to install a multi-use path, I would expect that impact to be very negligible in terms of how it affects vehicular traffic on the road. But hopefully my co-students and colleagues, Lily and Megan, might have a bit more insight in terms of what they would expect to see happening on those roads. So I'll turn that over to them.
So, oh, go ahead, Lily.
Well, we actually didn't look into of any like cycling planning or anything. We just identify the trends. So yeah, I wouldn't know what to suggest. I don't know, Megan, if you have anything to add.
Well, the intersections that we looked at, there is very much limited space. So we don't know if bicycle boulevards would be feasible for the intersection that we did present. And we looked at one of the other ones we looked at. There is actually a bicycle facility there at Ontario and Maine.
So it's Josefa here. So I agree with Anna that if we were to use the space we have at the boulevard, there will be little or no effect to the current trends of the traffic on that corridor, because we won't be using any space from the current like those lanes. It will be built on the side of the road, right? So I don't think there will be a big of effect on the traffic, but we can certainly look into it as well.
Are there any more questions? Okay. Thank you, Anna, Zifa, Megan, and Lee for a wonderful presentation and answering those questions. We will move on to the second part of the event. Let me share the screen here. In this second part of the event, this is going to be an interactive discussion on where active transportation work stands in the province of Ontario. This interactive discussion will be facilitated and led by Kate Whitfield of Alta Planning and Design. Kate is a professional engineer and a professional planner, and she is the principal of Alta Planning and Design and leads the Canadian operation from Ottawa. With that, I will welcome Kate to take over and lead the discussion. Kate, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. And those presentations that got us going today are perfect. We're sort of setting the stage. My colleague Ezra is here with me. I think, Ezra, we turn off the cameras here for helping with the quality, but can you screen share our deck that we prepared? So I'll let you get, there you go. So when I was asked to join this event, I was thinking, okay, how to make it a little different, maybe a little interactive and interesting. So there is no presentation deck, but we're going to talk about this theme of active transportation work in the province of Ontario. So Ezra is hosting this Jamboard, and he's going to drop a link in the chat box. So I'll show you how this is going to work in a second. But we came up with something where maybe we can get a bit of a conversation going. So we created 4 quadrants there. Top corners, popular topics, trends, and AT. And we decided we wouldn't put every single one of our own because we want to see what you drop in there. Other corner, favorite technical resources, job markets, bottom left, and other, right? It could be anything you want. So you don't have to log in here. You can just watch the page. And if you say something, Ezra will write it in for you. But if you feel like dropping it in, the only thing we ask is maybe put your name in brackets next to the post-it you dropped so that we can call on you. And then as we get talking, just use the raise your hand function and I'll call on you. And I see the attendance list and I know a lot of people here, so I'll just call on you anyways. If I need any help getting the conversation going. So I hope that sort of explains it. No slide deck. So what we're going to do is talk about sort of what's happening in your cities, what's happening in those meetings, the now virtual, right? That's sort of our common topics this year, maybe, and then what resources you use. And already that last presentation had tons of resources in there itself, so it's a great way to get started. So top corner, popular topics, trends, and AT. So I had written down protected intersections. So it's going to be in the new Book 18 update with guidance for it. Ottawa has built a number and has a number on the books. Toronto's building them, and it's a popular topic as a sort of an intersection design approach. So that's something definitely to talk about, what resources are there to help cities as they talk about it more. We also wrote transportation equity as a post-it, and then e-bikes, shared micromobility, neighborhood, local street bikeways. So this is great. I'm seeing things come in. Ezra's going to help keep it organized as they fly in there. But if you're writing your own, please put your name so that I can call on you to sort of explain your point. Otherwise, I'm only going to see little animal symbols for who it goes with. So that's sort of the popular trends. So I'm going to ask, and the hand doesn't go up, I'm going to say, Mr. Matthew Sweet, if you could unmute and either pick one of the topics and maybe add to it, and then I'll get a conversation going. Let's see if you join in. Ezra, you're okay there with the graphic? The other part about this, doing it this way, is we're also doing so many different types of engagement events. We could almost have a post-it for this. More interactive public meetings, interactive workshops with other people, where we can use these to share ideas. There we go. So, anyone want to raise their hand? No, so I'm going to then go and tie it to that second presentation. So Anna and Husafa, I loved that you talked about commuter cycling traffic. So you talked about the difference between recreational and commuter. That was in there. So that's a topic that we talk about a lot now. Design, instead of designing for recreational routes, designing for getting a commuter. So you use that in your presentation. You also talked about multi-use pathway as a design feature. That's a popular topic in our cities right now. Whether multi-use paths on the side of roads are a good design approach as a starting place. So it's very common for cities to either debate sort of unidirectional raised cycle tracks or multi-use pathways. Anyone want to try and talk about that within your community? Because that is a popular topic, the use of multi-use paths along roadways. Daryl, I see you here from Hamilton. I know you probably get asked about this kind of design feature.
Yes.
So can you talk a bit about your experience?
Yeah, I'm still just trying to orient myself a little bit more about how this whole thing is working, but I will just to share with you my user experience right now. But with regards to multi-use trails, of course, one of the big things we deal with is it's a bit of a trade-off. It's more space efficient because it accommodates both pedestrians and cyclists. But the expectation is for a cyclist to go slower because a pedestrian really can feel quite uncomfortable if a cyclist is racing by them at 25 kilometers an hour or something. So it is that real trade-off. Is like what's your level of service for the different users?
So that's the kind of conversation that so you said space saving, right? We talk about multi-use pathways as space saving. We think, oh, if we use a pathway instead of a separated bikeway from a sidewalk, we might be able to jam more in there. And then you also use the word user experience. What's it like as person walking there or person riding? And then also you have to think about intersection treatments too, right? And those kind of challenges. So that is a popular topic, is multi-use paths. It comes up a lot, whether it's multi-use trails, right? Sort of away from a roadway, or multi-use pathways. And so Daryl, you said there about just the user of this. So again, if someone has an idea, either they put it in the chat box or they unmute, we'll write it in the board for you, or people can write their own. Because what we're trying to say is what things are cities going through this year, right? When it comes to active transportation. And then if you have a great resource, that pink box, that's sort of we can list it there too, right? So we know Book 18 is a great resource. ITE is a great resource. TAC they just put out this latent cycling demand report. They're a great resource. We saw NACDO in that earlier presentation. They're a resource.
Kate, we got a comment about e-scooters, and I know there's lots of things coming in, so we might want to start tackling some of the things coming in. Okay, and I know someone commented about e-scooters as well.
Okay, so David, I see that you commented in the comment box. Do you want to unmute and
Sure.
ask your question?
Yeah, no. Well, I'm curious because I live in 3 jurisdictions. I live here in Calgary, is my main home. I live in Burlington and I live in Arizona. And in Arizona, I got introduced to e-scooters kind of reluctantly, but I've actually enjoyed them an awful lot. But they've done things to accommodate e-scooters to a certain degree, not great. In fact, the university has outlawed them because they actually go quite quick and they're a little dangerous when you have pedestrian traffic around. So that's a bit of a problem. They introduced them last year in Calgary, and they're a lot of fun, but now they're interfering with pedestrian traffic, and there's no policies or very limited policies and not well thought out. But here's what I've observed, at least in Calgary, is for pedestrian and bike traffic, they've separated them with lines on the pathways. And if you want to integrate bike paths and walking paths, they've integrated it with the normal traffic flow in the inner city. They've put concrete barriers up and they've taken out road space, and it's quite controversial, but they did it. And now the noise has stopped, and even with the pandemic, they've blocked off roads just for walking and biking. So I think my question or comment is, policy hasn't caught up with the requirements of where we want to go. And the reason it hasn't is it's very debatable with people that want to drive their cars, and you take away their space and they get quite angry. But I'd have to use Calgary as an example of where it's worked quite well from what I can see, and it's the best biking I've done anywhere I've gone, just because it's dedicated to biking and walking, and even at that, they're separated. So I'm just curious as to what's happening with e-scooters, because in some jurisdictions they've just outlawed them, and it's just, I don't know how it's going to work. They just go so fast, and you can zip around, whereas a bike you're a little more cautious. You don't behave that way. But on these e-scooters, you could really, they're a lot of fun. But
so that's great. So that's a great example of how to use this session to talk about popular topics. E-scooters, definitely a popular topic. And then great resources. So yesterday, the Ontario Traffic Council, so Ezra, you could drop that up there, did a AT symposium, and e-scooters was one of them. And they talked about what Ottawa is doing. So Ottawa is a great resource to follow about where e-scooters are permitted, about how to regulate the providers, about communication, about what they're hearing from the accessibility community. Region of Waterloo was speaking yesterday. So there's some great resources in Ontario about what people are doing related to e-scooters. There's sort of a bunch of tabs up there. Also, shared micromobility is the other word we use around that. So you can combine them together. But there's definitely some conversations going on about how to manage space. But also in your comment there, you were talking about a little bit about sort of closed streets and sort of dedicated space that's happening more lately with sort of all of 2020, what happened in 2020 and into 2021. So that's a great example of a popular topic and great resources. So Ottawa, Waterloo, and another more Ontario cities. So anyone else want to raise their hand, or I'll grab another subject up there. Like I see Sean Nix, you wrote public buy-in of continued focus on AT. Do you want to explain that one if you're still here?
Sure, yeah. So I think, we all understand this, and David pointed this out in terms of what's going on in Calgary, even locally here in Ontario. There's a continued push for dedicated cycling facilities and other enhancements to pedestrian facilities. I look at lead pedestrian interval as perhaps not necessarily a capital expenditure, but one that's just sort of an additional treatment to existing infrastructure. And, what is the public perception of all of this when it comes at the expense of traffic congestion, increased traffic congestion? And, us around the table as working professionals in this industry, we understand the continued benefits of promoting additional segregated facilities for active transportation, but whether or not the public is still getting this and whether or not we need to come up with additional educational campaigns, particularly not just for our population, but for our elected officials who also downplay a lot of the additional infrastructure. So you know, how we can really continue to focus on the education of the public and the elected officials on the benefits of all this.
Yeah, and there's an interesting thing you kind of said there that ties into the presentation question too. Are some cities saying we're not going to do a traffic study, right? Like there is some acceptance of slowing down travel time through a corridor. And a lot of cities in Ontario who put in some changes did it so fast they didn't do a study. So that's also interesting. That sort of ties in to the earlier presentation about understanding the impact at intersections, and then a little bit on public buy-in, because also as winter and snow goes away, we're watching some of our quiet streets come back, right? Ottawa's reopen or closing again some roads to become quiet streets that they would have done last summer for COVID restrictions. So it's interesting how that's also maybe changing some of city conversations. So if anyone else wants to put up their hand, I can grab another one up. But here, what we're trying to do here is you can see the trends, right? Emerging, there's transits on there, all ages and abilities. That word's been around for a while, but more and more cities are sort of thinking about what that means. And the great resource for that one is NACTO's work. And then more and more Ontario cities are trying to sort of figure that one out. Multimodal level service, resource for that one is also the OTC has their research paper on their website for multimodal level of service, and then has started a project related to that for the province. And that would also relate to Omar's your level of traffic stress. Sort of, but thinking about sort of, again, kind of tying back into that last presentation, but sort of what type of facilities would help sort of make what type of change to get the bikes, to get people onto bikes. So that's that famous sort of interested but concerned through to no way, no how. So Omar, do you want to unmute and talk about some of the ones you posted, either level of traffic stress, why you put that up there?
Thanks, Kate. I believe we have been focusing quite a bit on the quantitative measurement of where's the gaps in the network, where's the facilities, but we not very often talk about the experience of the users on these facilities, specifically for cyclists. And I think that could be one way to be embedded as part of the multimodal level of service to evaluate or providing bike lane or a separate facility, but what is the user experience? And that experience should be from all ages and abilities, rather than just a commuter, a very confident cyclist. So that was kind of the mindset when I put that comment on there.
Yeah, and you have a lot of really good ones. AT at roundabouts comes up a lot. So I'm just doing a little scan here, and then you had done pedestrian cycling boulevards. Do you mean that neighborhood kind of local street? You mean, yeah, neighborhood bikeways, local street bikeway treatments? Is that what you meant, Omar, for the pedestrian and cycling boulevards, or did you mean raised cycle tracks beside the road?
It's more so on the quiet streets and the neighborhood boulevards, yes.
Yeah. So that's something that you know, Ottawa has a few historically, but they're going to try and up their game a bit on truly having local street bikeways. So in terms of that world of resources, Vancouver has a number. Halifax passed an ordinance to try and define that better. So that's that neighborhood local street bikeway idea, that it's more than one of our green signs that say bike here, but actually traffic diversion and really slowing the speeds down. So another resource would be TAC on that one. So I was trying to be a little playful with this on sort of, so many organizations are out there for us on this subject. so many topics here are interrelated, but also I'm doing a lot this year with trying to help people get jobs in transportation generally. And I kind of smile to myself. If you look at the subjects on the popular topics, if a job seeker, you use some of that language and sort of dove into one of those subjects, that could really help them. So when I hear Anna, you earlier talking about your interest in AT and thinking about everyone at Mohawk College there when you're looking for jobs after school, it might not be you might not have a love of AT, but it's that idea of some of the language and some of the topics, the trends that cities are dealing with, helping get you noticed. So does anyone have a question about the job market for people and that sort of what cities are doing in hiring, if anyone wants to raise their hand? But you know, Caledon just had a job posting for an AT coordinator. Toronto does for, I think it's bicycle education. So you look at that as a trend too, right? Cities that have staff dedicated to this. I know Mississauga had so many job postings in 2020 from their transportation group. So that's also interesting to watch. Yeah, unmute yourself there. I see a hand up. That's wonderful.
Hello.
Hello.
I just have a question about like what type of positions you can actually apply for, because I'm a big fan of AT too, and
Yeah.
just graduated from the program, transportation program. I see lots of like postings with coordinators, but I'm not sure. Are we like qualified after graduating to positions like this?
That's awesome. So okay, I mean you're leaving. Sean Nix is everyone Mohawk College here? I'm not sure, but I mean I wouldn't say not qualified, right? You're leaving with your education and heading out into the workforce. Some of them will be called AT coordinator. It's interesting though, when a city posts that, sometimes it means education and programming, which is wonderful, but that's a different maybe type of job than design. And when you see in the job posting, if they start to talk about Book 18 and geometric design, then maybe it's more into cycling and pedestrian spaces. But it's interesting because a job can just be transportation planner, transportation engineer, transportation technologist, and it doesn't mean it's not an AT job. It would be sort of what company in a way, but you can also watch that in the language. But definitely, and looking at the slide, like we can share it afterwards. You have the link too. Anything that sort of shows more than an interest, like when someone writes me and says, I'm a cycling enthusiast. Okay, that's nice, but that's not really someone who has an interest in a career in AT, because really it's about moving people, not whether you ride a bike. So you can help your case, right? Do you have a follow-up question there? Did I answer it all? Is it helpful?
No, I'm just like, I want to disable the hand only.
Okay, wonderful. Anastasia, I think you were next.
Yes, hi. So I posted a sticky here on accessibility and mobility. So I guess a bit about myself. So I am at McMaster. I'm a civil engineering undergraduate, and I'm doing my Master's of Applied Science in Civil Engineering. And a lot of my research that I've been working on, and I mean, I'm lucky to have just been holed up during this virtual time and doing my Master's. And I'm looking a lot at the placement of public facility, or one of my side projects, I guess, is a placement of public facilities and how it impacts, and how where they're placed impacts accessibility and use of active transportation and just different mobility options. So that I'm kind of looking at more of a bigger citywide aspect. And this is just such an excellent opportunity. I'm excited that there's so many professionals within this chat. So I'd love to hear what's from your perspective in the industry, if that sort of analysis at the municipal level is done when you're choosing or for instance, deciding if you want to close a public facility or relocate it, and what sort of analysis that's done? Because a lot of this discussion seems to be happening first at like the intersection level and maybe at the network level in terms of like routes. But I'm just curious if like the next level of analysis is being done. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
No, that's awesome. That's really wonderful. But I'm just going to ask you one question just so that I get your subject right. When you use the word accessibility, are you talking about like universal design and AODA, or are you talking about equitable access to bikeways or pathways, sort of by community, or
sort of along the lines of with mobility? So how much can you what's the time? The mobility and accessibility together as sort of a measure is like, how can you get how can one person get from one place to another using a certain mode? So not like that, not the AODA accessibility.
Okay. Awesome. So Ezra, can you drop a pink note for the FHWA connectivity guide for Anastasia? So, I mean, the world of GIS and analytics is amazing, and it's way more than map making. It's sort of measuring connectivity and thinking about, if you build this, what it unlocks, if that makes any sense, what you have access to and to where people work, or community centers and other spaces. So there's some really neat research, and that's Ezra's writing one of them up on the board there. And then lots of cities are thinking about, when they do their sort of mapping for projects, they're trying to think about it differently in terms of where to invest, where to prioritize, what to connect. This is what Ezra does every day. So Ezra, I am going to put you on the spot if you want to unmute and add anything.
Yep. Sorry, do you want to set me up again for that?
I tried. I just with the FHWA guide and what different cities are doing to think about sort of connectivity and mapping related to sort of improved mobility. So, I mean, I might have just answered it with that guide and with that other work. And I know, Anastasia, you set that up too, that other cities might be able to chime in too of what they're doing to think about their networks differently.
Yeah,
so if anyone
I think
else...
I can talk a bit more about that. I think bringing up the FHWA guide is a great example, that thinks about a network from kind of establishes principles to think about a network. And so, I mean, I use that guidebook a lot for when we're looking at a city's active transportation network. And the principles are around network quality. So does it consist of facilities that are a quality experience for all ages and abilities? Is there route directness? Or, is it a circuitous route that goes out of the way? Does the network provide access to destinations? Does it provide network density? So, is there just one way to get to a destination, or are there multiple options in different routes that you can get around? Maybe you want to stop somewhere on the way and you don't have to go out of the way, stay on that network. And then also thinking about route completeness, and does it network completeness, and does it get to everywhere in the community? And so there's different ways and tools of looking at that, from using GIS or and thinking about that network and how actually trying to evaluate how it's connected or what's its quality.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. I guess to follow up, I just looked at the summary of the guide. There doesn't seem to really, another question I've been looking at a lot in my research is the question on emissions and potential emission savings through active transportation, as well as we know about travel, the independence that people can gain from active transportation and health benefits. But something I'm really looking at a bigger scale is emissions. So I'm just curious if maybe you also have a technical resource along the same lines of the multimodal connectivity, but maybe has that aspect of emissions.
So two quick things. If anyone has an answer to that, drop in the chat box and Ezra can put it in. And then my second one is if you can figure this out, that would be awesome. And could you tell me what you find? Because we talk about this a lot, but I think that's still a work in progress, Anastasia. So I'd like you to, can you help me? That'd be great.
Okay.
With a resource. I love that someone wrote active transportation course at Mohawk College this summer, hint, hint. I think I can guess who wrote that, but that's a great comment there. Can someone just tell me what time you want this to wrap up? Because then I'm going to ask Anna her question.
We had time till 1:30.
Okay, perfect. Great. I just wanted to be safe on that. So Anna, what's your question?
Hi, so I actually thought it was really interesting to hear Anastasia's question because mine sort of followed in a similar vein in terms of when you look at those sorts of higher level analyses being performed when people are using GIS, when people are really using, you know, mobility and geography and built environments to sort of assess how people are interacting with their environments and how they're moving through spaces. In order to make active transportation decisions. Are those the sorts of analysis that are being performed sort of like Anastasia said, in any way at the regional level, or is that, or not regional or municipal level, but is that something that we're seeing is more the purview of private contractors who may have the financial resources to devote to something like that in a way that a cash-strapped municipality might not?
Does anyone else?
Kate,
sorry.
I can start answering that one a little bit.
Oh, sorry, Ezra. If Ezra starts, and then if anybody else puts up their hand, then they could jump in too, because then we could get someone in the group helping out. But Ezra, you go first.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to answer it. I hope I'm following kind of what you were thinking about, but I know this relates a bit to what Omar wrote about level of traffic stress analysis and having, which is a GIS, often GIS based analysis for evaluating the experience of roadways throughout a municipality or a region. I think what we're seeing is it's oftentimes left to part of master planning processes. So when it comes to do that active transportation plan for the municipality or region, that's when those analyses get used and are part of kind of helping to identify where, as part of facility selection and developing recommendations to address those gaps in networks. But I think, you know, moving beyond just that one insular process, you can also think about Bike Ottawa, the advocacy group in Ottawa, made a level of traffic stress map that's actually you can access it. I will pull up a link and add it to the chat box after, where they used OpenStreetMap data to create a level of traffic stress map that is being updated regularly for the city. So that's a cool citizen science example of that.
That's great. Thanks, Ezra. I'm going to jump to another topic, but then like Alex, I see you're here. Maybe you want to add a post-it for road safety. I would guess that would be a popular topic. The arguments around safety, and when we make our decisions, it kind of even relates back to Sean Nix's comment about public buy-in, because safety is going into so many more sort of arguments, debates, as you may, for why we need to make certain improvements. And then good technical resources. What else do we have up there? I just had a little fun with podcasts and blogs, but I mean, honestly, sometimes that's where conversations happen. There was a podcast recently about neighborhood bikeways, right? With, oh shoot, I'll have to remember, but you know, just upping the game on having that kind of conversation. So someone else wrote in there in the other box, Center for Active Transportation. Yes, that's another great resource. And then under Anna, do you want to unmute and ask your, or was that your ArcGIS comment under the job market?
It was the same thing. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So Sean, are you still there?
Indeed.
You are a great resource for job postings. Anything you want to add to that bottom bracket about the job market?
Yeah, I mean, without necessarily shamelessly plugging, but I think, you know, Kate has already kind of put this anecdotally in her own LinkedIn feed and Twitter feed, but anybody who follows me, if for nothing else, I share jobs almost daily, particularly those for entry level or those who I think are good for eligibility for a lot of my graduating students. So it's something that I've been doing as a service for all of my own students, but I am aware that other people are taking full advantage of that service. So you can certainly find me on LinkedIn and you'll see at least 12 job postings a day almost at the rate that I'm going.
And what do you think people are asking, if you can? What are people asking for? Is it certain software skills? Is it certain, I don't know, attributes that are helping people get those jobs? Do you have any observation about the job market around AT?
Yeah, I mean, that particular area is one that I'm not as familiar with, and particularly I'm not aware of anyone who I've assisted who I guess is placed specifically within an AT role. But I think it's as you said, any experience with any form of AT, or at least any experience with the various tools that are available in AT, is certainly something that people are looking for. From my own perspective, you know, my career prior to Mohawk was primarily within a traffic engineering environment with a mix in road safety, and one way or another, I was always involved, sort of from a tangent point of view, in active transportation, whether it was acquiring property as part of a development application in the name of providing active transportation facilities, to considerations for pedestrians and cyclists in service road safety reviews. So one way or another, active transportation is going to hit virtually any job within the transportation field. So it's, you know, even if you're not necessarily wanting to target active transportation explicitly as part of your job, you really can't escape it. It's pretty much a natural part of the job at this point. So, but for those targeting AT specifically, pretty much everything that's on this board in my purview makes sense as something that employers are looking for as far as experience is concerned. Software can be helpful. I know that's probably more for a modeling type of role if you have experience with software, but you know, I think in the world of AT, particularly if you have an experience with design software, you know, most people are looking for AutoCAD. Lately, people are talking about MicroStation, Civil 3D, even more specialized software like Inroads and things like that. So, I mean, it all helps. As much as you can immerse yourself in is something that I would encourage everyone to do.
Oh, that's great. Just doing a scan here. Jose, what discussion are you having in the chat box? Because is that bringing back the emission subject?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention to Anastasia that there's a professor at U of T that works on transportation related emissions, but it seems that she was aware of her already.
Okay, and it's great that you shared it there.
Resources. Yeah, I don't, unfortunately, it's not one of the things I work on, but yeah, I'm aware of her.
Great.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, this use of this Jamboard might feel awkward, but we all in our consultant roles and teaching and at cities have to be doing our virtual meetings differently. We have to do our engagement differently, right? Where either we could have a whole other square about types of engagement right now. So telephone town halls, right? Or people are making more videos. So AT, like sort of a imagery to sort of explain a project. City of Toronto just did a sort of a voiceover video for the Esplanade Mill Street Bikeway. It's just so different to watch staff that you know having to do sort of the script and the visuals for a video that they post to the website. And then there's options for commentary there. That's like a new thing in our lives. I mean, we've always had online platforms for engagement, whether it's interactive mapping, right? And people can drop in pins and commentary. But really, we're finding different ways of sharing information and talking about this. A little relates back to public buy-in, a little relates back to how we share information, right? Anyone put up their hand and share an example from a city of public engagement in COVID times? I see a hand. Great. I'm practicing my counting to 10 before I keep talking. So Patrick, you're up.
Hi, folks. I'm just joining late here, so sorry for jumping in, but I thought I'd come in with your question on cities. At City of Hamilton, we've just rolled out the Engage Hamilton platform, which a lot of other cities across Canada and the States are using. And it's really nice to see just more sort of engagement from the city on the digital resources. And it couldn't have come at a better time with COVID. There's probably almost 100 now projects that have gone up on Engage Hamilton, and their city staff are learning how to use it to the best of its abilities, and to also sort of deal with the equity issues around people not being able to access that. So it's a exciting area, I think, for Hamilton, and curious to see how it goes, because it just opens up so many more possibilities for people to look at mapping tools, use mapping tools, have comments without filling out necessarily like just a survey or going to a public information event after hours. So it allows lots of different types of engagement, which is exciting to see.
Can you just explain the equity issues?
Sure, yeah.
What would be an example?
Yeah, so I mean, the most obvious one that folks are encountering in the city landscape right now is folks who have limited or no access to the internet. So you sort of necessarily have a slice of folks who are potentially upper middle class who are responding to polls and surveys, and so that being not necessarily a representative slice of who the public is, and that's something that engagement folks are always thinking about in general, with how they're engaging and where they're engaging, even in in-person events. So it's tied in with trying to lower the digital divide as well.
Yeah, so that's great. Thank you for that. So access to the internet, but man, there's so many other subjects too, right? Like time of day, ability, work schedules. But then at a council meeting, I heard a lady say that she was making her dinner while talking in the council meeting, right? So maybe not something she would have called in for before if she was standing in a big room in front of a ton of people. Other things.
Yeah, there's those opportunities for either side, right? That sense of it lowers some barriers and raises others.
Yeah, you got it. And it's interesting coming to this event. I didn't know that it would be not camera, right? And some cities are having council meetings camera on, and some are going camera off. And you could think it's to do with quality internet access, but also it has a different vibe and feel to being present. And then streaming those council meetings on YouTube, we're really changing things. And this all relates to active transportation and getting our projects approved, how we talk about it, right? Any other cities can share on that? See, if we were in a room, I could look at your faces and see if anyone's looking down at their phone or trying to avert their eyes, right? So this is all about what this is like over sort of virtual engagement. The one I'm not seeing under popular trends that I think is a topic is signalization. So I know I put up protected intersections, but more and more we're talking about bike signals and different sort of phasings. intersection treatments. So I think that's one that I think belongs up there, because Ottawa would have some bikeways where the bikes move separately than cars. Toronto would have some, lots of cities have them in Ontario, but it's still something that more and more cities are figuring out that they're going to have to talk about that to really, and that relates to that all ages and abilities, not just assuming that bikes and peds will move on the same phase as the vehicle. Any questions about that or stories from a city? Sean, are you teaching it at school?
Admittedly, it's one that we're probably doing more in passing than I guess sort of an active module on it, and naturally it's something that we are striving to work towards just because it is becoming such a hot topic and significant importance of awareness on that. So but I can't necessarily speak to it right now.
Yeah, and then it relates to the job market too. If someone was applying for a job and they had some experience in traffic signal design, they would be a pretty hot commodity, because I find that's harder to find. So yeah, if I find that one belongs under popular topic, really thinking about intersections differently. The other one, it was in the OTC's summit yesterday, but the multi-use pathway crossings of roads, I think more cities are dealing with that too. Related to either signals or other treatments. So I think that's sort of a topic in Ontario that is being discussed. Who put up autonomous vehicle? If you're still here, I'll give you a second to.
Hi, it's Dave Santee. Yeah, I had noted that certainly there's a lot of concern about infrastructure and preparing for autonomous vehicles and pods. I've been listening in on a lot of webinars with what's happening in Europe, and like everything else, they're moving much quicker. But the commercial market in Ontario is seriously looking at what to do with autonomous trucks as they leave the highways and enter the city corridors. So there's a lot of activity around there, and I don't know what implications will be in place or that we have to look at going forward, but I can just imagine. And I think there's a couple pilots. I know we're talking to Canadian Pacific about a pilot at Aberdeen and Hamilton about the potential of autonomous transport trucks. So something that is certainly going to increase.
And then in that sort of spirit of resources, I know TAC has started a task force. And then if anyone wanted to drop something in the chat box, it could be other resources related to autonomous vehicles. Obviously, it's a topic discussed a lot right now and for a while to come. So I'm scanning the page here. I do want to, there's a number of students here, give you a chance to come back on and ask another question if you want to ask anything. I'm going to give you that opportunity. Great, Anastasia.
Hello. So I know I've already asked the question. So if someone wants to raise their hand, I want to ask before me, but I don't see any hands. So this is just a general question in terms of how to stay involved. So I guess I'm slated to graduate in the coming months. And I've been involved with ITE for a while in my undergrad and now in my graduate studies. And I know back when I was getting involved as an undergraduate student, I honestly had this perspective. I thought being part of professional networks was just something that university students did or high school students did. But now as I continue to be part of these professional organizations, I see working professionals part of these groups to exchange knowledge and to kind of grow in terms of your career. So I'm just curious for any soon-to-be grads, what could you suggest in terms of staying involved with the network? I know ITE obviously is a great place to continue to be involved, but extra areas would also be appreciated if you could suggest. Thanks.
Wonderful question. So under those resources, right, of course, we have ITE, there's so many ways, right? Whether it's a local group or one of their national committees, there's so many ways with CITE. TAC is a little harder because it's more by membership by organization, I guess, to say it, but it's still a great resource. I personally plugged APBP, so that's Association of Pedestrian and Bike Professionals, because they have an Ontario chapter that meets, and it's really informal. So that's another great way to stay connected. Well, that's great. They're slowly changing TAC this year, student membership. Great. That's great because it's a harder one to be connected with. And then YPT, Ezra, if you could drop that up there. They're very active in the GTA, in lots of cities. So YPT is great too. But honestly, Anastasia, coming here, right, you've just interacted with a ton of people. And I personally, LinkedIn has been an effective way of connecting with people because you can meet someone today, right? And it's just an exchange, and it doesn't have to be transactional, right? Like, can I have a job? But you meet them here at this event, you spoke, you interacted, and then they could be a resource down the road. So it's kind of that formal stuff as well as organization based, if that makes any sense. But whatever these kind of sessions, they're different, right? We're no longer in a room together eating a luncheon provided at a conference center. But you can use LinkedIn after these kind of virtual events and connect with people that were here, and it's just an exchange. But then it can turn into a connection that sort of helps you as you look for jobs. For instance, my office is very small, but I tend to have met somebody, and then down the road we meet again, and it sometimes can turn into a position, right? So with the Career Connect thing that I do with CITE, it's also about sort of how to put yourself out there your own way to make those connections to help you get the kind of job that you're looking for. Anyone else wants to make a suggestion? Put up your hand too. Anastasia, were you going to say something?
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying thank you.
Okay, no, that's great.
Great for sharing that. And I see there's some links in the chat. Omar, thank you.
Yeah, and there's a comment there about mentorship. Mentorship can have many forms. It can be more formal. It can be sort of whatever you make it. So when someone offers you that hand of mentorship, I think you take it, and it can find its way sort of different ways in your life. Jeff, do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I was just going to mention from personal experience when I was a student way before LinkedIn was even a thought. One of the things that actually led me to my first job was the ITE student presentation competition. So take advantage of those things and put yourself out there. Just a suggestion.
That's great. Thank you. And one thing I'm going to add to that. It's okay to brag about it. Like, put it in your cover letter, you can say, I did this. I think sometimes we don't, you do those events, it's okay to share about them. Because you've just learned through the student competition a skill, you've demonstrated, you've put yourself out there, but use it. You can use it to get a job. Every presenter earlier today did a great job, right? And now I've connected to you. I've seen you present. I've hopefully already reached out on LinkedIn to get to know you, but get to know you through that. So it's okay to sort of leverage that stuff. There's nothing wrong with that to sort of help your job hunt, if that makes any sense. Jeff, are you going to add there?
No, I wasn't. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
I should have been muted. Sorry.
No. It's trying to have a conversation here. So yeah, so Megan.
Hi, my question is going back to the autonomous vehicles discussion, because at Mohawk we have to take a research and reporting class, and the topic is around smart cities. So I'm researching what active transportation would look like within a smart city if we have connected and autonomous vehicles. And one of the questions that I was asking for my survey was, as we see fully automated vehicles being implemented into cities, how can policymakers and planners continue advocating for active travel? So if somebody could please answer that, that'd be great. And I could use it for my research.
That's awesome. I'm gonna does someone else want to jump in on that one? I don't think my answer is going to be your research paper there, but I mean, I still think so. It's how do we still encourage active travel? Is that it?
Right. How can, because what I've been, based on the papers that I've been reading, a lot of concern is around the shift going towards vehicular travel, and most people are afraid that active travel would be ignored or not as much focus would be put on it. So I'm interested to know how others in the industry look at it and what they think policymakers and planners could do to continue advocating for active travel.
Awesome. Sean, do you want to start?
Yeah, at the risk of being the person at the same institution at which you're performing this research paper, I'll just sort of offer an opinion of mine only, really. But I think one thing that we all understand is that despite the fact that there's a growing appeal towards automated vehicles and people potentially just sitting in their back seat and letting the car do all of the driving task, the one thing that the evolution of fully automated vehicles in the system doesn't address is congestion. And as long as individuals continue to migrate towards fully automated vehicles as a single occupant, we're still going to have congestion, and automated vehicles might address the level of congestion to a point just because of gap acceptance between vehicles and the ability to concentrate more vehicles in the system due to car following and all that. But with levels of congestion, there's still going to be a need to balance that with alternative modes. So I would argue that continuing to promote active transportation by way of facility design, exclusive facility design, in a way that induces active transportation demand is still very pivotal to countering the potential impact of fully automated vehicles continuing to flood the system. But that's a personal opinion.
Oh, that's a great opener. I'm gonna my little 2 cents I'll add to that, Sean, is that like humans still need to get around, right? Like we need mental health, we need activity, it's like a way to spend time with children. It can be a way to go pick up something easily, like an errand. So that exists and still needs to happen. And then you said it there at the end. It's not just promote like education, yay, these are good things. It's by the inclusion of separated space, right, for that kind of travel. So to support it, not just encourage it. But that's sort of adding to your earlier comment about congestion and other feedback. Anyone else want to join in?
I would just say, Kate, it's also about the joy of getting around. I know I have a lot more fun walking and cycling around than I do when I have to drive somewhere. And even if I didn't have to drive, but I just sat in a car and it took me there, it'd be a lot more, not as fun. Wouldn't be as fun.
Meg, when we see your research later on, we'd like to see the word joy and human in there. We'll be watching for that when we read your work.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Well, we're approaching the bottom of the hour. I mean, hopefully we created a little bit of a conversation. I see a little more arriving there, PXOs up there now, and that's great. But there's so much. It's the other part about the technical resources side. There's no shortage of. Well, we could use more research, so I'll take that sentence back. There's room for more research and more data, but there's lots of guidance documents related to design through Crow Manual, through NACTO, through TUC and Book 18, especially the update. And then organizations like FHWA and their work, they also did a guide on small town and rural multimodal networks, because of noticing that most of the design guidance was more for urban streets. So they saw a gap in what was available and created the small town and rural multimodal guide. Maybe not all the answers, but sometimes the visuals and other guidance in those documents can help a conversation to happen, maybe some change made. And then Sean, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to shamelessly plug the course that we're running this summer. It is a part of the curriculum at the college for the 4th semester students, and many of the students on this call can talk about their experience with that last summer. But we are slated to run it on Mondays, beginning May the 11th from 6 to 9. And we do currently have 6 spots available for non-daytime students. So pretty much anybody around the world, as long as they're tuned in at 6 o'clock Eastern Daylight Savings Time, can follow along. It's not only looking at trends in active transportation and even a lot of the resources that are showing this, but even how to use the technical guidance, everything within the context of design of facilities, within the context of Vision Zero and road safety reviews, and a number of different topics. So I'll leave the URL for anyone who is interested. Again, not restricted to anyone in Hamilton, anyone around the world can take it. And it's a great opportunity for anyone who wants to learn more on active transportation. Zibby Petch from IBI Group is slated the instructor for this. Anybody who knows Zibby, she's a very seasoned professional in the world of active transportation, and you know, she runs a great course.
Oh, that's great that Zibby does it. And I see a testimonial from Anna there. That's wonderful. I think that's great. And you made a great point there, Sean, what has opened up, right? By anywhere in the world, right? Could be taking that course. That's pretty amazing.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, it seems like a great place to wrap up and pass it over for the last slide there, maybe, and your announcements about future events.
Thank you, Kate, for leading the interactive discussion, and for all the participants who contributed to the discussion, and for Sean for providing information about the active transportation course being offered at Mohawk. That was a wonderful discussion. Before we close, I'd like to let everyone know that Toronto, Hamilton, and Southwestern Ontario section of SITE is virtually hosting its 13th annual joint SITE student presentation competition on May 5th. The deadline for abstract submission is April 9th. Also, SITE Hamilton section is coordinating mentorship call on behalf of ITE McMaster Student Chapter to participate in a virtual mentorship coffee chat program with the students from McMaster University. The deadline for enrolling for this program is also on April 9th. I will once again thank all the speakers, including the student speakers and the attendees of this event. I would also like to thank the Hamilton Section Executive Committee members for their cooperation in putting together this virtual event. We are also planning to organize our next speaker event tentatively in May 2021. And till then, stay safe and healthy. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.